John Hope Franklin was teaching there.
John Hope Franklin was teaching there, E. Franklin Frazier, Lois Jones, Ms. Tate, names of eminence. And, I mean, those were the days at Howard. And I wanted to study history because I knew so many of those prominent people were there. And my major professor, because in those days Howard would allow you to start taking courses immediately in your proposed major. So I was going to do, strangely enough, European history. So Harold Lewis, Professor Harold Lewis, was my major professor. And he was very patient and kind with me. And he would, because he indulged me, the first semester I wanted to skip some of the required courses in the humanities and social sciences and do history. And he allowed me to do that. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't do well. I took too many courses in history in my first quarter. So in about my third quarter, I think they changed the semesters then, in 1952, I wanted to take an art course. So I went over to Driskell Hall, where the physics and biology and some of the other sciences were located, on the third floor, and I took a drawing course. So here's where the break came. One of my professors, Mr. James Wells, I took a course in drawing from Professor Wells. And I was drawing, this was, as I recall, the spring of 1952, and I looked around, and over my shoulders there was a tall gentleman, very well dressed, looking down at my drawing, and he said, "What is your name?" And I said, "David Driskell." He said, "I don't know you. Are you an art major?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, what is your major?" And I said, "History." He said, "You don't belong over there. You belong here." That was James A. Porter. So I went and changed my major, just like that. And
he was, Professor Porter was clearly a pivotal figure in your life.
Oh, definitely. He represented, if there was ever a role model for me of what I wanted to be, it was Professor Porter. He dressed well, he spoke well, he was so knowledgeable about his subject. And when I went into the classroom to pursue a course that he was teaching called Modern Negro Art, he used his own textbook. And I was impressed with the fact that there were these professors at Howard all using their own textbooks. They were brilliant. They were perhaps the brightest people in those subject areas in the world. They were landlocked, so to speak, at Howard. They couldn't go anyplace because Yale didn't want them, Harvard, Princeton. Those schools didn't want them. And so, for example, John Hope Franklin, he kind of broke out of the mold when he went to Brooklyn College from Howard. And, but that was almost unheard of in those days. So here were these scholars, these eminent people, Allen Locke, folk like that, who were at Howard University, world-renowned scholars, and we had a chance to interact with them. Now, we didn't know their eminence. We would, you know, say, "Oh, gotta go over there and hear Dr. Locke lecture today in chapel," you know. And you know, you look back on it and say, my God, we were in the presence of greatness. These people were eminent in their fields.
Part of that, I'm sure, is inevitable in terms of youth and the difference in terms of the generations, and you know. But Professor Porter, what was it about him that brought such a major impact in terms of redirecting your life?
Mm-hmm. Well, I suppose I could see in him everything that I wanted to be. He was an artist. He was articulate. He was a scholar. And he was a gentleman. I mean, he could entertain and hold forth in the best of company. And I saw that as the person I wanted to be.
So even then you saw yourself being both an artist and a historian, art historian.
Yes, because he pulled me aside. He came into the classroom one day and I was painting, and I thought I was doing pretty good, and he complimented me. And he said, "You have talent in art and as a painter." He said, "But you have a good mind." And he said, "You have got to help carry on the tradition that I'm in." He said, "You've got to help define the field." And at that time we were calling it Negro art. And he said, "You know, I won't be here forever." He said, "We'll have to pass the mantle on to somebody." And he said, "You have the capacity, you have the mind." So it was that kind of confidence, you know. I just knew I was his favorite student. Even though Lois Jones would say in public, she said, "This is my pet student." So everybody was aiming to be closer to the teacher, you know. And Lois would encourage us by, in a way, kind of treating us like we were already artists. She would take us downtown and we'd be painting in the streets, pretending we were in Paris, painting as she did, and so forth. So she was a little more indulgent. But Professor Porter was strict, to the point, but accepting in the sense that you knew you had to achieve to be there.
Did you have a sense when he talked about carrying on the tradition and defining the field, did you have a real sense of what that meant, the enormity of it?
Partially. I think most importantly, I felt anointed. I felt that I was the chosen one. I would entertain my fellow colleagues by standing up, giving a lecture without notes, the way he did. I would try and dress like him. He was always immaculate, you know. He dressed almost like he had English suits and, you know, and always the right little objects to go along with everything.